Well, here's my official welcoming to everyone here tonight that's in live, and also to you that's out on the website, all the different websites. Um, Welcome to you also. This is Saturday Night Live Life Recovery. This is where we come together to help you to deal with the messiness of life. Anybody have any messiness?
Sure.
I think that's all of us. And if you don't realize you're a mess, you are in a problem. So,
Doug, take the appointment.
John, don't talk about that stuff. So, anyway, we got an interesting night tonight. And by the way, in case you didn't know, daylight savings time goes off a week from tomorrow. Or actually Saturday night, but it's way late and or going on, happens on Sunday morning. So that would be November the 3rd. So we'll have Saturday night at regular time, but then it'll shift after we're done. The whole world's gonna change after we're done. So.
No, the whole world will change out November 5th.
So, well, that too. So, all right, so tonight, we're gonna be, John, you're gonna be reading the steps, right? And, no, wait, that's the wrong one, isn't it? How'd I get the wrong one? John's still reading it, and Robert's doing the step on personal boundaries, correct, Robert? And then reflection is Brandon. Brandon's gonna be doing reflection. The questions. He says, you can't stump him. You can ask him anything, and he knows everything. Right? No comment. So, anyway, tonight will be our, we'll be on step 10. We continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it. How easy is doing that, promptly admitting it? Anybody got a comment on that? Is it pretty easy? No? Not always? Who said not always? So sometimes it's easy?
Depends on the situation.
Depends on your mindset.
Yeah. Did it start off like that?
No.
No, okay. So it's something we have to kind of grow into, wouldn't you say?
I agree.
All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about personal boundaries. And this was Robert's topic he picked for tonight. So I think it's a good topic. It's a very important topic for us. And we'll be talking quite a bit about that. So the first question is, what does personal boundaries mean?
Don't go there.
Well, that I guess that could be an answer. What does personal boundaries mean? Robert, you want to say something? Yes?
Well, it can mean a lot of things, but I think for those of us who have not had personal boundaries before,
It's a good statement.
it means that we need to start setting some, because our life was out of control when we didn't have personal boundaries. So it's kind of logical to think that maybe that would help getting control, or getting our life in more control.
Yes.
So, to me, personal boundaries just means don't be quick to just accept everything that people tell you and plans that are made. If you commit to something quickly, you may find that it's sometimes hard to keep those commitments, but it is important to keep the commitments that you've agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
So don't go into those without some self-reflection and thought of whether you really want to or should make those commitments.
And understand what you're committing to,
Right.
that will come up in our lesson that you'll be presenting, which I think is a very significant thing, because sometimes that's how a lot of bad things seem to happen to us, because we agree to something that we don't even have all the information. And so, anyway, I'm assuming we'll talk more about that later. Anybody else? Personal boundaries. Yes, Will?
Personal boundaries are the limits and guidelines that people set for themselves to protect their energy and well-being. So a personal boundary is actually something that I set for myself to don't allow myself to go in. Like, I have a personal boundary that if there's dope in that house, I'm not going to that house. You know,
Right.
If you're high, I'm not going to hang out with you. I got personal boundaries of setting limits to where on the things that I don't want to be around. I got limits on things I don't want to talk about, and I would tell you, but I really don't want to talk about it.
Yes, well, that's a personal boundary.
But that's not the kind of personal boundaries I set.
Yeah, well, those are very good.
I need to do better, not allow myself to slip back in that old way of thinking.
Okay, that's real good. Appreciate that. Anybody else?
The point in which you won't allow abuse for yourself or others.
Say that again, please.
The point in which you won't allow abuse for yourself or others.
That's good. That's good. And because my question was, I want to give everybody a chance to talk, and I still do. Anybody else have any other statements before
The point you don't want to go past.
the point that you don't want to go past? That's good. Anybody else?
For me, my personal boundaries are like my personal bubble. What I allow into my personal life and
Okay.
my personal surroundings.
Your personal space.
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
In my head and in
Good.
my heart.
Good. Now, there's two sides of this coin here, but I guess I ought to ask the question first. Who are these boundaries for? Well, we're talking about personal boundaries, so we're talking about us. But just because we're talking about us, does that mean it's just for us? Just for our well-being? Could having personal boundaries really be beneficial to others, like Jay was talking about a minute ago?
Yes.
Because the fact of it is, what I like what John Maxwell says. He says that you tolerate, you get more of.
Good one.
Hello. And that's another way of talking about boundaries, right? Shall I say that again? That you tolerate, you get more of.
One more time.
Okay? And there are many other ways of saying it, but that you tolerate, you get more of, because that's what you put up with. So personal boundaries, I like what Will's definition, he read that. In fact, I have almost that same definition down here, that they're personal boundaries that refer to limits or rules we have for ourselves and within relationships. Okay? Because our boundaries has to do with other people around us, right? And it's for our benefit, but it's also for everybody else's benefit. Now, they may not see it that way in the beginning, but the fact of it is, you don't have to be mean or ugly about it. You have your rules, and that you tolerate, you get more of. And if you don't tolerate it, then things will usually begin to shift one way or another. They define what we are comfortable with and how we like to be treated by others. Okay? Which is another way of saying what you tolerate, right? And personal boundaries can be physical, emotional, mental, even spiritual. Healthy boundaries allow us to maintain our individuality, okay? Who we are, who we want to be, what we want to be, how we want to show up in the world, how we prefer to be, would be another way of saying it. What do you think about that statement? Our individuality protects our well-being and ensures respectful behavior, a balanced interaction with others. Because all of our life is really involving relationship in one way or another, right? In fact, God created us for relationship. Relationship with Him, relationship with others. And we have to learn how to get along with ourselves so that we can get along with everybody else. Was that all right how I said that? Anybody have a problem getting along with yourself? Don't answer that. And so, anyway, one of my titles for tonight is what are the 7 types of boundaries, and I'm going to list them real quick. And that is physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, emotional and mental boundaries, spiritual and religious boundaries, financial and material boundaries, time and energy boundaries. You know, some people just will suck the energy out of you, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Hello. And so you have to be aware and what you can give and what you can't give, you know, or how much, how often, energy and time. And then number 7 is non-negotiable boundaries. And by the way, I have a list. I have paperwork back here, I think, on where the offering basket is. That list, and I think I saw Lori had one of them, right? So yes, they're right there. So they're back there with it has those listed and all kinds of other information. So next question. Are you ready for the next question? How do we connect together step 10 and personal boundaries? How do they go together? Shall I read step 10 again? Yeah, well.
If I take a daily inventory, I know where my limits are and how far I can and cannot allow it to go by learning from my mistakes.
Yeah, that's it. And that's part of it, being self-aware or having that personal inventory or having being aware of our personal boundaries. How good I did, how good I didn't do, what I need to have work on, because we all have to grow, right? We all make mistakes. We see what we did wrong, and then we work on doing it better next time, right? Hello? And so the step 10 talks about that we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it. And so what we need to do is there's actually 3 points to how these 3 come together according to my research, and that is that we, as I've already said, number 1, self-awareness or personal evaluation or inventory. That's number 1. That's how both of them relate together. Number 2 is accountability. Who are you being accountable to? Well, you're accountable to you, yourself, to God, and another human being, possibly, right? And so number 3 is maintenance of relationship or relationships. And so we look how we've done that, you know, and sometimes we have to move slowly in those things because I like to compare it to a brain surgeon. When a brain surgeon is doing surgery, they make very fine cuts, right? Fine, little cuts, fine, you know, because sometimes things are very fragile, and oftentimes relationships can be fragile. So we don't go in with a bulldozer. We go in with a small scalpel, so to speak. Does that analogy work for you guys? Questions? Bobcat, yeah. Any other comments? Questions? The summary here is step 10 and personal boundaries encourage people personal growth in the areas of self-awareness, accountability, and continued adjustment in relationships. Both emphasize personal responsibility, respect, and ongoing work necessary to foster healthy balance in interaction with others. How's that? So that's what we're going to be talking about. It's a very important subject. So we will not be having music tonight, Vanessa was involved in another activity where she needed to go, I think her daughter's birthday, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then John says that Bobby's in the hospital. How about if we have a word of prayer for Bob? How about that?
Yeah.
Father, in the name of Jesus, we just ask for our friend, Bobby. We ask for your touch, your ministry. We don't know what's going on, but you do. We just hold him up. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
And now John's going to come up and he's going to read us the 12 steps. Thank you, everybody.
Step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over our problems and that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, we made a decision to turn our wills and our lives over to the care of God. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. Step 7, we humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, we made a direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10 is where we're at tonight. We continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. So back to step 10, where we are tonight. We continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And let's see. Is there anybody that needs bracelets tonight? Not here? Do you want to go on with bracelets? Or?
Do what?
Nobody here needs bracelets. Do you want to
Okay.
go on with bracelets? Or?
No, nobody needs one.
Okay, and we have books. Our workbook is $3 and our Bible is $10. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I'm Robert. We are on step 10, and we're going over the subject of personal boundaries. Step 10 says we continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. We all have particular weaknesses, and it is...
Hold it right there. I want to make sure I caught you on that one. Would you say that again?
We all have particular weaknesses.
What do you think about that statement?
Well, I have particular weaknesses. Some of them are, and most of them, to be honest, are the ones that got me into trouble with my addiction to gambling. That's my particular weakness. And so this whole study has been about the boundaries that I'm setting to help me avoid that compulsion to gamble.
That's good, Robert. Anybody else have any comment about this statement that we all, it says all. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
Agree.
How many agree with it? Should I ask how many disagree? Because everybody raised their hand, so I guess there's, so we all have particular weaknesses, so we're all fellow strugglers. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And we may not have the same weaknesses, but they all are similar, right? They have us. If you funnel them down enough, there's a lot of similarities. But as they feather out, yes, there's a lot of different variations. But fact of it is that we all have particular weaknesses, and I wanted to go over that. And congratulations, the first step of getting better is becoming aware, right? Because if you don't know that if you don't know what's going on, then how can you deal with it? Because then it's everybody else's fault, not yours, right? Anybody recognize that one? All right. So thank you for indulging me there. So I appreciate that.
Of course.
I think you anticipated it anyway, didn't you?
Well, I hope for it.
Oh, really? Okay.
I do, yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right. And it is often helpful to establish personal boundary lines to support these weaker areas.
So, what do you think that means, Robert? That personal boundary lines to support these weaker areas. What does that mean? What do you think it means?
Well, it means we have to decide where we're going to draw the line. Because if we cross that line, chances are we're going to regret it, because that's a weak area of our life if we cross that line. If we set that line, maybe we'll think about it before we cross that line. At least that's the hope. Just for an example, I live down the street, and there happen to be two little convenience stores, both of them almost exactly the same distance from where I live. Well, one of them is the one that I frequent. I go over there to buy my cigarettes and whatever, candy or soda or whatever I might need, that I need conveniently, not to walk all the way down to Walmart or something. So the other one is just as convenient and has the same kind of stuff for practically the same price, but the difference is one of them has those machines in them that are, well, I think they're slot machines. They're supposedly not real gambling machines, I guess. That's why they can be in the convenience stores, but they take your money, just like the ones at the casino do. So I had to make a line that I'm not gonna go in that one that has the slot machines in it, because that's a temptation that I don't need in my life. And so I don't go in that store, I go to the other one. And that's just an example of a boundary line that I have chose to set.
To support that weakness.
Right, exactly.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Anybody else? Comments? Anybody else have an example? where you're using that principle?
Your weakness is a deep ravine and you just set up a fence line so you don't fall into it.
Yes. For your own protection, right?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about protecting yourself, right, Robert? That's what you're talking, protecting yourself.
Right.
So, thank you, Jay. Anybody else? Would anybody here be so bold to say what boundary line you need to impose out there to help you to reinforce protection in a weak area? Yeah,
Really
Jay.
like what Robert said.
Jay was going to talk.
The types of relationship one develops, you know, the friends that don't have cannabis or does have cannabis, for me, I need to start being more mindful of the types of people I surround myself. And even if they're a great personality, if they're having things around them that negatively impacts me, no matter how beneficial even still their friendship might be, it needs to get cut. That's a boundary for me.
So that's presently, or that's one you're planning on?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
presently. I've been trying to mitigate what kind of relationships I either have come into my life and I cut off and things like that. It's just because it's so easy. It's one of those weaknesses that you don't think so harshly of because it's reached a point where it isn't thought of as harshly. So it's easier to come upon making it a bigger and easier weakness to, well, harder weakness to actually battle because everyone else is like, you're okay, just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So, that's good. Congratulations. Will?
I really like what Robert was saying about think before you do, think it all the way through. I have a bad tendency to think that, you know, like, I don't like my job today, so I'll just go find another one. But the truth is, I really like the people I work with and whatever, you know, and that's an example, because it's not true. I don't like nobody. No, I'm just kidding. But it always sounds better on the other side. The grass always greener on this side. When I was married, a girlfriend sounded better. As soon as I got her, I lost my wife, she sounded better. And it was the same option, just from a different point of view. So if I can take the time to actually stop and think before I do, generally, I can set a boundary on how far I even allow my mind to go to that, making that decision. Because once I got married, really, that shouldn't even been an option.
That's good. Good. So you're saying either you have or you're are starting to figure out a place where you need to place a boundary to help you. Is that what you're saying?
No, I've already placed that boundary. I already know that women are evil. They all have different personalities. Just because you like one personality tomorrow, you're probably not gonna like that other one. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's always their fault, right?
Always somebody else's fault. No, the truth is, though, you know.
My statement was sarcasm, by the way. I get in trouble all the time for making those type of comments.
But the truth is, you know, I've noticed that for a long time. I've said that I'm trying to redefine that boundary, I guess you might say. It's not so much trying to set the boundary, because I know that it should be there, but I think there's also a limit to how far you can press that too, because I kind of, yeah. I don't want to get too much about me, because it's not all about me, but there's always a boundary in our life.
Oh, well, we're all listening.
There's always a boundary in my life that I can find to set if I'm actually doing this 10th step that you're talking about.
Yes.
When I look at my life, not only do I see where I need to put the boundaries, but where I can actually excel in other areas too, because I don't know about anybody else, but my mind likes to play tricks on me, and the minute I find something that, where I have a weakness, that's all I want to replay in my head. And I think it's been said in here before, but when you lose one thing, you gotta fill it with something else. It's a whole lot easier to fill it with a positive. If you know what a positive is, instead of just focusing on the negative that my mind wants to play all the time.
That's very well said. Good, good. Anybody else? Okay, Robert.
We may need to clearly define our commitments to others.
No, I was gonna wait till the period.
Okay, we may need to agree on certain limitations in order to maintain peace.
What do you think that means?
Well, this is something I've had to work on because I guess I'm a people pleaser, because it's hard for me to say no. If someone asks me to do something, my automatic reaction is said, sure, no problem, you know? But I've found that it's best if I say, well, let me think about that and I'll get back with you. Before I make a commitment, I want to make sure that I can follow through. So, and it's helped me to do that, because there's been occasions when, after I think about what's involved in that commitment, I decide that that's probably not good for my long-term goal of improving my life. Because it's a commitment, like you were saying earlier, involves your time and your energy.
Right.
And so a lot of my energy is already, I'm old, so I don't have nearly as much energy as I used to. So I have to be careful how much I commit myself to, because, you know, I'm not a spring chicken, obviously. So anyway, it's just important not to take it lightly. When you commit to something, you should take it seriously and follow through, because if we're following this step, when we take personal inventory and find out that we've been lax on keeping our commitments, then we have to admit it. And chances are we need to apologize to the person that we committed to and say, hey, I'm sorry, I probably made that commitment in error because I'm not able to carry it out faithfully. So let's just kind of say, I will let you know when I'm able to do that. And we'll just take it one commitment at a time, not for here and evermore, you know. That's just a couple thoughts.
That's good, that's good. Anybody else? Yeah, John?
Our main commitment needs to be go to our boundaries. Because it's easy to think that we can do something that's against our boundaries and make a commitment, and it pull us back.
Okay, I agree with that. If we tie in, you know, what our personal values are, our intent, our desire, where we want to go, what we want to do, and if somebody is asking us to do something that's not in alignment with that, that's not, you've just sabotaged yourself by agreeing, right? Oh, and whether that's that could be any one of those things on that list. You know, physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, emotional, mental boundaries, spiritual, religious boundaries, financial. You know, people ask. You know, that's a real big danger spot. Material boundaries, time and energy, which Robert was talking about. And then did I mention non-negotiable boundaries?
Yeah.
You know, that's where there is no give in this area right here. You know that, and you know that. You want to know that, and you need to be certain about your non-negotiable boundary, so that you can know that you can draw that line and know that it's in your best interest. It's good for you, whether somebody else likes it or not. And you have to know that already. You have to have already tested it out. You have to know it, and you have to have your own personal evidence to reinforce that non-negotiable boundary. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
And because if you just think it's a good idea, because of where we've been and where we want to go, we're susceptible to making not the healthiest choice. Is that too muddy? Is that too muddy? That's clear enough, right? So here we are, we may need to clarify what I'm able to do this, but I'm not able to do that. Okay, I can do this only when there's open spots in my calendar. I have people call me all the time wanting things, and I say, well, let me check my calendar. Let me see. Okay, and then sometimes I'll say, well, I've got a commitment already. I don't have anything. It's all committed up so far. We can, maybe in a month from now, if you get back with me, we were scheduled. That's how I've had to run a good portion of my life.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, what about emergencies? Well, there's always emergencies. But how come your emergencies is more important than my emergency? Oh, that's a tough one, isn't it? All right.
I also like the last phrase here, in order to maintain peace.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my life, that is one of the most important factors. I want peace.
Yes, good.
I do not want conflict. I don't want to make people feel bad. I don't want to make myself feel bad. I just want peace. And so I have to be really careful about what I'm willing to do, because if I overextend myself or overcommit myself, maybe I'll go ahead and do it, but I'm not gonna feel good about it afterwards, because I'm not gonna have peace. And then that's gonna start festering if I keep on doing that, and pretty soon I'm gonna resent the people that asked me to do it, and I don't wanna do that because I want peace. So it's really important, I think, to set these boundaries, because our long-term goal is to have good relationships and peaceful relationships. At least that's what I want.
And it sounds like a lot of what we're talking about here is almost always saying no, but we only have so much time, we only have so much energy, we only have so much of everything that we have, and so and if we disperse it in areas that we don't feel good about, then we're not going to have that for areas that we'd like to be able to do that in, and that we want to do, and that we feel that it'd be needful or productive. Does that make sense? And so this is, nobody's going to do this perfectly to start off with, and maybe never. So we're just trying to learn how to balance ourselves on this this rope that we're trying to walk, this rope of life. And so that's where we're at. So don't get too upset. You just learn from everything, your successes and the ones that didn't work out so well. Okay? I didn't want to use the word failures, but All right, go ahead.
Jacob and his father-in-law Laban had some conflicts. As they were working them out, they entered into an agreement by drawing a clearly defined boundary line and setting up a monument to remind them of that commitment.
Okay, hold right there. So, that first part there is that Jacob and his father-in-law, which was also his uncle, by the way, they had a conflict. Can you believe having a conflict with a family member? Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah.
Okay. And so he had a conflict. So what do you think that means?
Well, it means they had a pretty serious conflict in my mind.
Yes, they did.
Because Jacob wanted to marry one of Laban's daughters, the youngest one. And Laban said, okay, but you gotta work 7 years for it. And so Jacob did, and then Laban tricked him and gave him the oldest daughter without his knowledge. And then when Jacob found out, he was pretty mad and said, I wanted your youngest daughter, Rachel, instead of Leah. He says, okay, you can have her, but you gotta work 7 more years for her.
So whose fault was that they had this conflict? Be careful.
Whose fault?
Yeah.
Well, it sure wasn't my fault.
Was Jacob's fault because he didn't look at, didn't see the way the laws were written? Was the older daughter supposed to get married first and then?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, they both had a part in this, right?
Yeah.
And this is what the lessons is about here. We both got our part, our side of the street, and maybe he took things for granted and was trying to make a deal, which he was, but he was old enough. You know how old he was here?
I don't know.
He was 77 years old.
Well, they lived a lot longer back then.
They did, but I mean, that messed me up to find out that how old, I mean, he's old enough that he should have been aware of some things, right?
Mhm.
But he was tricked, but the fact of it was he didn't negotiate the full deal. He just ran headlong into this thing. So I just wanted to point that out. Yeah, his Uncle Laban should have made sure. Now, we'll talk about this more. He should have made sure that he understood what kind of deal he was getting into. How many times have you made any deals that you didn't give all the facts?
Yeah.
You don't have to respond to that.
Or you didn't get all the facts.
No, I'm talking about you didn't give all the facts.
Well, it goes both ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I'm responsible, I feel that I am responsible to be honest to the other person. I sold a deal sometime back to a fella, and I told him all the negatives. And I felt bad about even selling it to him. And even before we closed, I said, I just want you to know for sure. All right, this is it. And because I wanted to make sure that he knew, okay? Of course, I know he's thinking, well, I'm way better than him, and I can fix all that stuff, and maybe he can. I hope to God he can. And but he said, hey, it's not on you, it's on me. And I was able to take a deep breath at that point. I did feel a little bit better. I'm still holding my breath though. But
How long ago was that?
oh, it's been a year and a half, something like that, I think. Maybe a little longer.
Yeah.
So
why-
anyway.
That's why there's warranties. When you buy a used car,
Well,
it's got the big sign on it that says, as is. No
well,
warranty.
that's in the contract as is, but that don't always matter, and it's not just about that, it's about your own self and how, that peace you was talking about, that's important.
Exactly.
And if I want to have peace, I have to protect that. Do you not agree?
Yep.
Does that apply to you? So, when you entangle yourself in the stuff that's going to drag the soup out of you, maybe you need to think about it. How about? that okay terminology? So, any other, let's see, we were talking about Laban here and clarifying the boundaries and making the commitments. So I think, any comments from anybody? Are we doing okay tonight? Is it helping any? You're not sure yet? It all just feels bad, no good?
It's good.
Thank you. Got one out of the crowd. All right, go ahead.
All right, so from Genesis 31, verse 49 and 51 through 53, it said, "May the Lord keep watch between us to make sure that we keep this covenant when we're out of each other's sight. See this pile of stones," Laban continued, "and see this monument I have set between us. They stand between us as witnesses of our vows." So Jacob took an oath before the fearsome God of his father Isaac to respect the boundary line.
Any thoughts?
Well, I think it's good. They, despite their differences in the past, they determined that the future was going to be better and they were going to be peaceful with one another, and they wanted a clear line and a monument to remind them of that. And I like the thought there that to make sure that we keep this covenant when we're out of each other's sight. And sometimes we unfortunately have the thought that out of sight, out of mind, even when we're thinking about God. And that is totally wrong. We need to get that thought out of our head, because God sees all, no matter what if we're trying to fool somebody. And in my own case, I've done this countless times where I relapsed and started gambling again, and I thought, well, I won't tell my wife. I think I can hide it from her. But I keep forgetting about God, He sees it. And eventually it all came out, and sure enough, it caused lots of problems. So that's really important for me to remember that just because maybe someone doesn't see me do things, I know I did it. God knows I did it, and eventually everyone else is going to know I did it.
And these stones, these pile of stones, or a monument, and Laban talked about it as being like a watchtower. It was to be a reminder for each of them that was a boundary line. Now, their particular boundary line was that this boundary line was there. That if you crossed that boundary line, you only crossed it to do no harm to the other person. So you're only going to do it to do good. So it wasn't like a rigid the Berlin Wall or anything like that, and you may not even know what that is. But it was that they would remember, that was there as they remembered it, and of course they made it. They backed it up. That was between them with God, with their higher power, and that goes down into your spirit, right? Because it comes to your memory oftentimes, particularly when you've violated that covenant. So, any comments or questions on that? All right.
Restoring trust in our relationships is part of recovery.
Do you agree, disagree with that?
Absolutely.
How do we restore trust?
Changing behavior to show you can never be that person again.
And how long does it take to do that?
Years. Because you have to undo, for however long you did it, you have to triple that time to show that whatever that behavior is not a fluke. It's for certain.
Right.
It takes time, right? And it takes demonstration.
Yeah.
And because, to be able to be trusted. Because once we were trusted simplistically, it just, it wasn't based on evidence, it was just simplistic trust. And then after we destroy that trust, then we have to rebuild it. And rebuilding trust is, I think, a lot harder. What do you think?
I'm going through that right now. It's a lot harder.
It is hard. It's doable, but how do we do that?
Actions.
By changing oneself.
Do I?
By changing oneself
Okay.
and consistently showing
All right. Let's say that in a different way.
Be different.
Okay.
I don't know how to
By making commitments, like Robert's talking about, and following through, keeping your commitments.
Yeah.
If you make a commitment, you keep the commitment.
Be a man of your word. Through and through.
Yes. So it's by making promises and keeping promises. Because isn't that what got us into most of our trouble, is by making promises and then not keeping them, whether they were to ourselves, to God, or to our significant others, our children, family members,
Yeah.
our employer. Should I say it again, employer?
So the saying, actions speak louder than words, that's especially true when we're trying to rebuild trust. Because words are cheap.
Well, they're cheap if they're, how can we say this? They're cheap if they're not backed up, if they're not followed through, if they're a lie, it's just smoke and mirrors then. So.
Yeah.
Any other comments? It was good, Jay. Anybody else? Brandon, you haven't said anything.
I know, just listening.
You got time on the mic here a minute, you got right. I got that.
Okay. And I forgot your name.
Will.
Cable?
Kegel?
Caleb.
Kalen, that's right. Kalen, did I say it right, Kalen?
Yeah.
Kalen, right. I know another guy I think that's his name.
To do this, we should define our expectations and enter cautiously into commitments.
What do you think that means?
Know
Well,
what you're capable of giving.
Say it again, I couldn't hear you.
Know what you're capable of giving of yourself.
That's good, that's good. Don't overreach is another way of saying it, right?
Yeah.
I like the define our expectations, because we shouldn't expect too much of ourselves, especially when we're early in recovery. For one of the symptoms of a compulsive gambler, they call it grandiose delusions. Thinking that when you make that big win, you're gonna pay off your parents' house and, you're gonna do all these great things with that money that you get. Well, that's just ridiculous, you gotta be honest with yourself and really be truthful with yourself when you're setting these personal boundaries, and make sure that we're not overextending. We have to know what we can expect from ourselves, because we're not Superman, we're not God, and we have limitations, so we need to be honest about that.
So you're talking about self-delusion here, right? So why would we why would we lie to ourselves or try to, you know, to distort our thinking or, you know, induce a delusion?
To make ourselves look better.
And to kind of,
And to be, to make people like us.
but it's not just, but what your statement there, which is really good, is basically it was about you being able to like you. Really, when it comes right down to it, right?
Yeah.
If I win big, then I will do this big, grandiose thing,
Yeah.
and that would be really good. But the trouble is, there's so much I got to dig out of. I never get to that one, unless I rebet that big hit, right? And then
Yeah.
and then you go spiraling down.
Yeah.
So it's we oftentimes, and our brain will help. It wants to lie to us to get us to do what it wants, and it wants that hit of dopamine, right? Where are we here?
Saturday Night Live.
We
Yeah,
are
thank
not merely responsible.
Oh, okay, right here.
All right, we are not merely responsible for what the other person knows about.
Okay, hold it right there. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, and I looked up merely. Anybody wants to give me an idea what merely means? Do what?
Only?
Only. Only, just only is what it said in the dictionary, okay? So we are not just only responsible. I thought that was interesting, okay? We're not only responsible for what the other person knows. That's not all. I mean, we need to, I believe it's saying, and I believe that's the way I try to function, is that I try to give everybody all the information, so that there's nothing hidden.
Yeah.
And why did I do that? It's because I've got to like me. I got to be okay with me. You know, I got to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Right? I'd like to sleep at night. So, anyway, any thoughts on that, Robert?
No.
Anybody else?
Will,
Why do we need to set boundaries?
why do we need to set boundaries? Because it helps. It helps. Because if we don't set boundaries, our life is out of control. That's just a fact. Especially for people who have problems with addictive behavior. If they don't have boundaries, it's always gonna go right back to the addictive behavior.
On that sheet back there, there's an area there. It says, it kind of goes to your question, if you want me to share this information with you. It says, the first one is, we all need boundaries. Well, we talked about that a while ago, that we all agreed with that statement. And it says, boundaries keep us safe. Jay was talking about like a fence to keep you from falling off a cliff, and we all have those cliffs that, why is it that, particularly when we're younger, we always want to go up and look over the cliff, right? Right? We seem to push the edge. How's that worked out for us? You don't have to answer that. Boundaries differentiate between me and from you. That's what, in families, they have a family dynamic in families called enmeshment. And that's where they don't know where maybe a parent stops and the children begin. They're enmeshed so there's no real line to be able to define the parent and the child, for instance, all right? Enmeshment, does that make sense?
Yep.
And so, where are we at? And boundaries help us focus on what's most important to us. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah.
And then, and boundaries improve relationships by getting clarity of your expectation and your responsibilities. Brings clarity. Very important. You know, I'm responsible for this, you're responsible for that, which we talked about a couple different ways. And, but it's hard to figure out what there's some other statements on there about when it's hard to figure out what boundaries you need to work on, and basically it's saying if you got problem areas in your life, it probably has to do is a lack of boundaries. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
We are personally responsible for our own honesty before the watchful eyes of God.
Good.
These relational commitments are not to be entered into lightly, but when we make them, they must be vigilantly maintained.
What do you think that means?
Well, I think there's a scripture in the Bible that says, whatever you're doing, you should work at it whole-souled as if you're doing it for God. And it's kind of talking about work. If you're going to work for someone, put in the honest work as if you're working for God. But it's the same way in our relationships. If we want a healthy relationship, we have to be honest with those people. We have to, the same way with our relationship with God. God doesn't need us to be honest with Him because He sees and He knows everything. But if we want a real relationship with God, then we need to be honest with Him and with ourselves. Because otherwise it's not real.
It's good. Anybody else have any comments on that?
And one other thing is, so that's why it's saying about commitments. Like Laban and Jacob, they made the commitment